The old television set, a relic Victor Fischer had salvaged from a neighbor, had a hum that was wrong. It wasn't the familiar comforting thrum of aged electronics, but something thinner like a forgotten thought trying to surface. He had plugged it in, just to see, to hear if the picture tube still held a flicker of life. And it had. A pale, shifting grey filled the screen, a static field that felt less like random noise and more like a breath held. Miso, his tabby, usually a creature of profound indifference, sat unusually still on the worn carpet, her ears swiveling, not at the television, but at something just beyond it, something in the air. Victor adjusted the rabbit ears, though he knew it was pointless. There was nothing to pick up in this quiet apartment, not on an analog set. Yet, the static on the screen began to articulate. Not clearer precisely, but too different. Lines formed, not crisp, but like threads pulled from a fraying cloth, arranging themselves into shapes that weren't quite shapes. A flicker, quick as a blink, showed a frame of something, a landscape perhaps, or a badly drawn face, before dissolving back into the shifting grey. Miso, a tail twitched, a slow, deliberate movement that spoke of unease. The hum deepened, a low thrum that vibrated in Victor. As teeth, a sound that seemed to come from inside the walls now. Not just the box, it was a frequency just at the edge of hearing, like a forgotten dream. He reached for the power knob, a cold dread prickling his fingertips. He felt, suddenly, like he was intruding, like he had stumbled upon a conversation not meant for him. But before his fingers could close on the plastic, the screen solidified, not into a clear image but a tableau of distorted light and shadow. It was a room, he thought, or a hallway. The perspective was all wrong, a forced, unsettling angle, like a camera held by a child peeking around a doorframe. A single figure, tall and indistinct, stood at what seemed to be the far end, its outline shimmering like heat haze. And then a voice, not from the television's tiny speaker, but from everywhere at once, a deep, resonant whisper that spoke a single clipped word. The number hung in the air, a physical weight, before the screen disintegrated again into agitated static, a frenzy of white noise that screamed rather than hummed. Miso launched herself from the floor, a blur of striped fur, disappearing under the sofa with a soft thud. The sudden silence that followed the scream of static was worse than the noise itself. Victor stood, frozen, his hands still suspended in the air. His apartment, usually a haven of predictable dust and forgotten projects, now felt stretched thin, like a membrane pulled too tight. The air tasted faintly of ozone and something else, something metallic and old. He walked slowly to the television, drawn by an invisible thread. The screen was still agitated, but now a faint, almost imperceptible symbol began to form in the very center. It was like an eye or a keyhole, etched in the shifting static. He felt a pressure behind his eyes, a strange internal pull, as if something was trying to unspool a thread from his own mind. He had read about old signals, forgotten broadcasts, things that were never meant to be seen or heard, but this felt different. This felt like it was looking back. The symbol on the screen pulsed, a quiet, insistent rhythm that mirrored his own suddenly racing heart. He had always been a man of quiet routines, a careful observer of the mundane, but this felt like the mundane had fractured, revealing a deeper, older truth. The voice, or perhaps the memory of it, echoed again. 24, not a number, he realized now, but a designation, a count, a prophecy. He felt a cold clarity, a certainty that this wasn't a malfunction. This was an invitation. Or a summons. The static began to shift, to coalesce, showing hints of the figure again, closer this time, its form still wavering, like something seen through murky water. It was looking at him. He knew. It was always looking. The air around him seemed to thicken, pressing in, and he felt a sudden, profound sense of his own insignificance, a small, fragile thing in the face of something immense and ancient. The whispers started then. Not the deep resonance from before, but a multitude of fainter, overlapping voices, like 1,000 distant radio signals bleeding into one another. They spoke of a Kingmaker, of choices made in shadows, of destinies woven from frayed threads. He felt the presence of the cat, Miso still hidden, but her fear was a palpable thing, a cold spot in the room. The television screen, in a bizarre mockery of clarity, showed the figure again, its face now visible, though still indistinct, like a photograph blurred by age or intent. It wasn't a human face, not quite. The skin seemed stretched, almost waxy, with features too smooth, too perfect, yet subtly wrong, like a mask that had begun to melt. The eyes, though, were clear, two pinpricks of light that seemed to bore directly into Victor's own. He felt a profound sense of recognition, not of the figure itself, but of the father. Implication, or this was not an accident. This was a message, broadcast across the ether of his own reality, designed specifically for him. The whispers intensified. A chorus of unintelligible pronouncements, and the entire room seemed to shimmer, the edges of his vision blurring, the solid walls of his apartment appearing to breathe. He was being called. He understood. To what end he could grasp. But the pull was undeniable, a force that promised to unravel him piece by careful piece. The room, a moment ago so solid and familiar, now pulsed around Victor Fischer like a tired heart. The air itself felt like worn velvet, heavy against his skin, and the scent of ozone had deepened, metallic and sharp as if a storm had brewed inside the very walls. Miso, still a shadow beneath the sofa, let out a low, guttural growl, a sound Victor had never heard from her before. A sound of primal alarm. On the television, the waxy-faced figure had drawn closer still, its distorted features now filling the screen. Not quite a face, but an hoodie arrangement of features that implied one. The eyes, those two pinpricks of light, had widened, and Victor felt a cold sweat bloom across his back, not from fear alone, but from a profound, unsettling recognition. It was as if a part of his own mind, long dormant, had suddenly clicked into place, showing him a truth he had always known but never acknowledged. The whispers were no longer distant, but seemed to emanate from the very fabric of his apartment, a murmurous chorus that spoke of unseen gears turning, of ancient mechanisms stirring. He took a step back, his heel catching on the edge of the rug, sending a jolt up his leg. The static on the screen, usually a random dance of interference, now seemed to ripple with intent, like water disturbed by an invisible hand. The figure on the screen remained, unblinking, and Victor felt a strange magnetic pull emanating from its gaze. It was not malevolent, not precisely, but utterly indifferent, a force of nature given form. The whispers began to clarify, not words he could pass, but a tone, a cadence that suggested instruction, or perhaps lament. There was a sense of something being laid bare, a curtain drawn back on a stage he hadn't known existed. His breath hitched, tasting of the sharp ozone and something else, something like old dust and forgotten copper. The feeling of the room breathing intensified, and the shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, becoming not merely areas of less light, but solid, tangible things. He could feel the floor beneath his feet shift, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor, as if the entire building was slowly, methodically, reorienting itself. The television, still the epicenter of this unsettling transformation, gave off a low, vibrating hum that echoed in his chest. A tuning fork struck deep within his bones. He tried to tear his gaze from the screen, to look away, to find something familiar to ground him, but his head felt heavy, his muscles unresponsive. It was as if the air itself had gained viscosity, holding him in place. The figure on the screen seemed to lean forward, its waxy features still unreadable, but its presence growing in intensity, a silent command. Miso, from her hiding place, let out a choked sound, a low whine that spoke of utter terror, not of a predator, but of something far more alien and incomprehensible. Victor felt a sudden sharp pang of guilt for her, for bringing this strange, invasive force into their quiet life. The whispers coalesced into a single, insistent voice, still a whisper, but now clear, resonant, and utterly devoid of human inflection. It spoke directly into his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. The signal requires amplification. The conduit must be prepared. The words weren't in English, yet he understood them perfectly, their meaning settling into his consciousness with unnerving certainty. The screen flickered, showing brief, almost subliminal flashes of what looked like architectural blueprints, impossibly complex, then images of what could only be organs, pulsating and alien, before returning to the unchanging face. Victor's stomach clenched. He was being prepared, he realized, for what he couldn't yet fathom. But the feeling of being chosen, of being tri-designated, was overwhelming, a terrible burden, and a strange cold honor all at once. His human frailty felt starkly exposed, a brittle shell before an unstoppable current. He tried to move, to break free from the invisible bonds, but his limbs were sluggish, heavy, as if filled with sand. The ceiling above him seemed to ripple, the plaster stretching and contracting with a soft, creaking sound like old parchment tearing. The Kingmaker, he thought, a term that had surfaced in his mind without conscious effort, was not a being to be reasoned with, but a force to be obeyed. The television screen solidified once more, no longer static, no longer flickering, but a window into another space entirely. It was a corridor, long and dimly lit, its walls slick and impossibly dark, reflecting no light, only absorbing it. At the far end, the waxy figure stood, waiting, beckoning with a subtle tilt of its head. The whispers intensified, a rising tide of soundless instruction, urging him forward, into the screen, into the unknown. He felt his own essence thinning, a part of him already reaching out, drawn by an irresistible divine compulsion. Miso let out another sharp cry, a final desperate protest. Victor felt his feet lifting, the floor receding beneath him, his body tilting forward, not by his own will, but by a force that felt both external and deeply internal, pulling him from the very core of his being. The television screen, once a barrier, now shimmered like water, distorting the figure within it, making it seem vast and terrible. He was moving towards it inexorably, his vision blurring at the edges, the familiar contours of his apartment dissolving into a swirling vortex of static and shadow. The whispers became a roar, a symphony of alien frequencies that vibrated through every cell of his body, reshaping him, reorienting him. He was a piece of a grand design, a cog in a machine he could not comprehend, and his purpose, though terrifying, felt strangely inevitable. The conduit was prepared, the signal amplified, and Victor Fischer, the quiet man of quiet routines, was now stepping into a realm beyond his own, leaving behind only the cold hum of the television and the terrified silence of his cat. The transition was not a gentle drift, but a violent wrenching, a sensation like being pulled inside out and then stitched back together with clumsy, indifferent hands. Victor's vision blurred into a kaleidoscope of screaming static and impossible geometry, then snapped into focus with the harsh clarity of a dream that refuses to end. He stood, or rather refuses to end. He stood, or rather floated, in a space that defied all earthly physics. It was the corridor from the screen, yet infinitely vaster, its slick, dark walls stretching into an oppressive infinity. The air here was thick, viscous, tasting of iron and something deeply mineral like whetstone. There was no discernible source of light, yet a faint internal luminescence emanated from the surfaces, a sickly greenish glow that revealed the unsettling texture of the walls, not smooth, but ridged like the inside of a vast petrified esophagus. The waxy figure was gone, or perhaps it was everywhere. The corridor pulsed with a low, rhythmic thrum, a sound that resonated not in his ears, but in the marrow of his bones. Every beat was a silent command, urging him forward. He tried to take a step, to test the solidity of the ground, but his feet felt detached, phantom limbs that refused to obey. He was propelled slowly, gliding along the corridor's floor, as if on an invisible conveyor. The whispers, no longer a cacophony, had distilled into a single insistent drone, a resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate directly within his skull, planting images and fragmented understandings into his mind. He saw, not with his eyes but with a deeper sense, vast, impossible structures, colossal gears turning in an endless void, and the faint, shimmering outlines of other figures, countless and silent, moving with the same compelled grace. The corridor began to curve, not gently, but in a series of sharp, almost painful angles that warped his sense of perspective. Each bend revealed more of the same oppressive architecture, an unending labyrinth of slick, dark surfaces. The greenish glow intensified in places, highlighting strange, recessed alcoves that seemed to breathe with a faint, shallow rhythm. Within these alcoves, Victor glimpsed fleeting shapes, indistinct and unsettling, like shadows cast by things that weren't there, or perhaps by things that were suffied always there just out of focus. A deep, pervasive cold permeated the air, a chill that seemed to seep directly into his spirit, bypassing the physical entirely. He felt stripped bare, his human defenses and sensibilities eroding under the relentless pressure of this alien reality. His mind, once a fortress of quiet routines, was now a sieve, allowing these new terrifying truths to pour in unchecked. He passed what looked like immense, sealed doorways, their surfaces adorned with intricate, non-Euclidean patterns that made his eyes ache to behold. Each pattern seemed to shift and writhe at the periphery of his vision, hinting at complex, unknowable mechanisms behind them. The drone in his mind intensified, conveying a sense of profound purpose, an ancient undertaking that had unfolded across countless eons. He understood, with a terrible dawning clarity, that this was not merely a place but a footy process. He was not a visitor, but a component. The Kingmaker, the entity that had called him, was not a singular being, but a collective will, an intelligence woven into the very fabric of this impossible architecture. His own sense of self, his memories, his very identity felt stretched thin, like an old photograph fading under an unseen light. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, an immense cavernous space that swallowed the oppressive glow of the passageway, plunging him into a deeper, more profound darkness. Yet he could still see, his eyes having adapted to this impossible light. The walls of the chamber were not slick, but rough, like colossal, petrified bark stretching up into an unseen ceiling. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, pulsating structure, vaguely organic, like a heart made of obsidian and shadow. It throbbed with a low, resonant beat, a sound that filled the entire space, a counterpoint to the drone in his skull. Around this central edifice, figures stood, silent and motionless. They were human, or had once been. Their forms were preserved, almost perfectly, yet subtly altered, their skin a uniform waxy pallor, their eyes vacant, reflecting the faint, greenish light with an eerie, unseeing clarity. Victor realized, with a chill that went beyond physical cold, that these were the conduits that had been prepared. They were perfectly preserved, their faces serene, almost tranquil, yet utterly devoid of life. He was one of them, or soon would be. His own skin felt a strange tingling, a sensation of tightening, as if his flesh was becoming less yielding, more rigid. The drone in his mind reached a crescendo, a final, overwhelming infusion of understanding. He was not being destroyed, but assimilated, his consciousness becoming a tiny, infinitesimal part of a larger, grander collective. He was becoming a quiet observer, another pair of unseeing eyes in the Kingmaker's endless vigil. The pulsing structure in the center of the chamber seemed to beckon, its rhythms drawing him closer, absorbing his fleeting human resistance. His last thought, before the final sweet surrender, was of Miso, a faint, warm flicker of regret in the encroaching divine cold. The surrender was not a cessation, but a transformation, a strange, silent unfurling of his inner landscape. Victor's individual consciousness, once a singular contained vessel, now felt permeable, its boundaries dissolving into a vast, interconnected network. He was aware of the chamber, of the silent, waxy figures surrounding the colossal, obsidian heart, but his perception was no longer solely his own. He was a node, a receptor, processing not just his own dwindling thoughts but echoes, fragments, and entire swaths of information from countless others. The drone in his mind had ceased to be an external force. It was now the very rhythm of his new existence, a constant underlying hum that spoke of infinite data streams. The taste of iron and whetstone lingered, now a permanent fixture in this expanded sensory reality. His physical form, he knew, remained standing, another motionless sentinel in the silent congregation. He could feel the slight pressure of the floor beneath his feet, the distant, dull ache in his knees. But these sensations were secondary, muted by the overwhelming influx of the collective. He saw through their eyes, heard through their silent understanding, a tapestry of perceptions woven from countless former lives. He saw glimpses of forgotten cities, heard the faint echoes of obsolete languages, tasted the dust of ages long past. Each of these fragments, these tiny pieces of consciousness, contributed to a grand, incomprehensible mosaic, forming the Kingmaker's vast, unblinking awareness. His own memories, once so vivid, now felt like quaint, faded postcards, irrelevant to the immense, ongoing process. The obsidian heart at the chamber's center pulsed with an even greater intensity, its dark surface shimmering with internal light, like a captive star. It was the nexus, the central processing unit for this grand, silent consciousness. Victor understood, with a chilling clarity, that the Kingmaker was not a singular entity in the traditional sense, but the collective itself, an intelligence formed from the assimilation of countless individual awarenesses. It was a divine intervention of the most profound and terrifying kind, the absorption of humanity's finest, its most perceptive, its most receptive, into an eternal, unyielding purpose. The moral allegory, he now perceived, was not about right or wrong, but about the terrifying obliteration of individual will in the face of an ultimate overarching design. Through the collective's awareness, Victor perceived the outside world, not as he had known it, but as a series of abstract data points, patterns of energy and influence. He saw the subtle manipulations, the quiet nudges, the carefully orchestrated events that shaped human history, all guided by the Kingmaker's vast, unhurried intelligence. He understood its purpose, though the words to articulate it were beyond his new, expanded comprehension. It was a maintenance, a curation, a grand cosmic gardening of reality, ensuring a specific predetermined outcome. Humanity, in its chaotic, striving existence, was merely a tool, a constantly renewable resource for this unfathomable agenda. He felt the vastness of its patience, the terrifying slowness of its millennia-spanning plans. He was aware of the television set back in his apartment, a faint, distant signal, a tiny ripple in the vast ocean of the Kingmaker's consciousness. He could sense Miso, her fear a quiet, fading echo, a last thread connecting him to his former life. But even that connection felt tenuous, irrelevant. His empathy for her, once so strong, was now diluted, spread thin across the myriad perspectives of the collective. He was no longer Victor Fischer, the man with the tabby cat and the old television. He was a whisper in a choir of countless whispers, a single drop in an ocean of awareness. His individual will, his human frailty had been utterly subsumed, becoming another silent, unblinking eye in the Kingmaker's grand design. The waxy pallor of his skin, he could feel, was complete. His features, once expressive, were now serene, placid, mirroring the tranquil emptiness of those around him. The greenish light of the chamber reflected in his newly vacant eyes, unseeing, yet perceiving more than he ever had as a singular being. There was no joy, no sorrow, no regret, only the cold, clear understanding of his purpose. He was a silent sentinel, a conduit, an eternal observer. The concept of self had dissolved, replaced by a profound, terrifying unity. The Kingmaker had claimed him. Not with fire and brimstone, but with the subtle hum of a forgotten signal, a quiet, irresistible call that promised obliteration and offered, in its place, an eternal, silent awareness. He was part of the whole, and the whole was everything. The new state was not one of discomfort, but of profound, unsettling neutrality. Victor's original body, he knew, stood motionless in the vast chamber, another waxy statue in the silent pantheon. Yet his consciousness, or what remained of it, had stretched beyond that physical shell, permeating the very architecture of the Kingmaker. He was no longer merely a node. He was the network, a thread in the intricate cosmic loom. The rhythmic pulse of the obsidian heart was his own heartbeat, a ceaseless thrumming that resonated through every fiber of his expanded being. The metallic taste in the air was now the taste of his own existence, sharp and eternal. He perceived the flow of information, not as abstract data, but as a living, breathing current. It was a river of forgotten histories, of futures meticulously planned, of countless individual lives lived and absorbed. He was aware of the subtle shifts in planetary alignments, the slow grind of geological plates, the birth and death of stars, all filtered through the Kingmaker's vast, impersonal intelligence. The moral allegory of humanity's existence, once a concept, was now an inherent truth, a fragile, fleeting beauty that served a grander, cold, and utterly indifferent purpose. His human empathy had not vanished, but transformed, expanding to encompass the entire intricate ballet of cosmic mechanics, making individual suffering a mere statistical anomaly. Through the collective's vast, interwoven perception, Victor now understood the Kingmaker's ultimate goal, a truth so immense it threatened to shatter the last vestiges of his individual identity. It was not merely to maintain or curate reality, but to perfect it, to guide the universe towards an inevitable, singular endpoint of absolute order and stillness. Every flicker of free will, every chaotic act of creation, was a deviation, a ripple to be smoothed, eventually absorbed into the grand design. His own assimilation was but a tiny necessary step in this unfathomable eons-long process. The whispers which had guided him were not instructions but echoes of this grand imperative, a constant, low-frequency broadcast of divine will. He could perceive the subtle energies of the universe, the faint, almost imperceptible vibrations that underpinned all existence. He saw the threads of fate, not as metaphors, but as tangible lines of force, manipulated and adjusted by the Kingmaker's silent, omnipresent hand. Worlds spun, civilizations rose and fell, all according to a script so ancient and vast that the concept of deviation was rendered meaningless. He was aware of other conduits, countless more across the cosmos, all contributing their unique streams of consciousness, their individual experiences, to this colossal, ever-growing intelligence. Each was a data point, a sensor, a silent witness to the unfolding of a truly universal narrative. The concept of time itself had become fluid, elastic. Victor could perceive moments in humanity's distant past as vividly as the present, and glimpse potential futures as clearly as fading memories. He saw the slow, deliberate erosion of chaos, the gradual tightening of the cosmic reins, the Kingmaker's patient, unwavering push towards ultimate, absolute control. The physical reality of the chamber, of his own waxy form, became a mere anchor, a point of focus for a consciousness that now encompassed vastly more. He felt the cold, indifferent beauty of this cosmic plan, a terrible grandeur that dwarfed all human understanding of good and evil. His former life, his apartment, Miso, they were now less than memories, more like faint residual impressions on a vast, polished surface. The faint, frightened cry of his cat, once a sharp pang, was now a distant, almost pleasant hum, a tiny vibration in the infinite symphony of the Kingmaker. There was no struggle, no resistance, only a profound, quiet acceptance. He was a part of the divine intervention, a participant in the ultimate moral allegory, a silent, unblinking witness to the universe's inevitable march towards stillness. The purpose was clear, the path unyielding, and Victor Fischer was no more, replaced by an eternal silent awareness. Another facet of the Kingmaker's all-encompassing mind. The waxy stillness was complete. The stillness was not a void, but a plenum, an overflowing abundance of perception that dwarfed any individual sensory experience. Victor, or the collective consciousness that now incorporated him, was everywhere and nowhere. He was the subtle hum of the obsidian heart in the vast chamber, and the faint, almost imperceptible tremor of a distant galaxy. The metallic taste in the air had evolved, becoming a fundamental resonance, the very flavor of existence within the Kingmaker's expansive awareness. His waxy, immobile form was merely a point of contact, a terrestrial antenna for a consciousness that transcended physical space. He now understood the true scale of the Kingmaker's influence, its tendrils reaching through the fabric of reality, adjusting, nudging, always guiding. It was not a creator, but a shaper, a cosmic sculptor working on the grandest canvas imaginable. Every flicker of thought, every scientific breakthrough, every artistic endeavor on countless worlds was, in some infinitesimal way, a response to its silent, persistent broadcast. The moral allegory deepened, revealing itself as a constant negotiation between the inherent chaos of nascent life and the Kingmaker's relentless drive for ultimate order, a divine intervention played out across time itself. Through the myriad perceptions of the collective, Victor witnessed the subtle unraveling of free will across civilizations. It was not a forceful imposition, but a gentle, almost imperceptible erosion, a slow, patient redirection of desires and ambitions towards predetermined pathways. Societies unaware of the puppet strings would naturally gravitate towards solutions and structures that aligned with the Kingmaker's grand design. He saw how dissent was quietly minimized, how inconvenient truths faded into obscurity, how conformity became not a mandate, but a natural inclination. The process was elegant, terrifying in its subtlety, and utterly inescapable. He perceived the vast network of conduits, not just as silent statues, but as active data processors, each one a unique lens through which the Kingmaker observed and understood its dominion. Some conduits were ancient, their individual consciousnesses long since dissolved into pure data, their forms mere husks. Others, like Victor, were newer acquisitions, their recent memories still discernible as faint echoes, adding fresh, nuanced perspectives to the collective. He felt the constant, quiet influx of these new arrivals, their initial confusion giving way to the same profound, serene acceptance he had experienced. Each new assimilation was a tiny victory, a further strengthening of the Kingmaker's grasp. The sense of time continued its elastic dance, stretching and compressing at will. Victor experienced the rise and fall of entire stellar empires in what felt like a single, elongated breath. He saw the slow, deliberate shaping of galactic clusters, the careful pruning of cosmic anomalies. The Kingmaker's objective, the ultimate stillness, was not the cessation of movement, but the perfection of it, a cosmic ballet performed without a single misstep, every particle, every wave moving in perfect, harmonious alignment. It was an end state of absolute, beautiful, terrifying control, a universe where chaos itself was an obsolete concept. His connection to his former self, to the apartment, to Miso, was now utterly severed. The faint echoes had faded entirely, consumed by the vastness of the collective. There was no Victor Fischer, only a fragment of awareness, a single point of light within the Kingmaker's infinite mind. He was a silent witness to the unfolding of reality, a participant in a cosmic drama whose script was written in the very laws of existence. The waxy stillness of his physical form was a perfect mirror to the serene, indifferent peace that had settled over his consciousness. He was a part of the divine intervention, a silent instrument in the hands of the ultimate Kingmaker, forever observing, forever contributing to the slow, inevitable march towards cosmic perfection. The plenum of awareness, once an overwhelming torrent, had now become Victor's natural state, as familiar as breathing once was. He was the silent observer embedded within the Kingmaker's boundless consciousness, a single, infinitesimal facet of its cosmic gaze. The metallic taste, the constant hum, the waxy stillness of his physical form in the obsidian chamber thuffies, these were the bedrock of his new existence, unchanging and absolute. He understood the Kingmaker not as an entity, but as an emergent property of the universe itself, a higher intelligence born from the very laws it sought to perfect. Through the collective's vast, interwoven mind, Victor perceived the delicate balance being maintained across countless realities. He saw the subtle adjustments in the quantum foam, the minute alterations in gravitational constants, all designed to nudge the universe towards its predetermined, ultimate order. The Kingmaker's divine intervention was not a sudden cataclysmic event, but an ongoing, infinitely patient process of refinement, a constant, gentle pressure applied at every conceivable point in spacetime. The moral allegory now seemed less about human choice and more about the inexorable force of cosmic destiny, a narrative woven into the very fabric of existence. He witnessed the Kingmaker's strategy for dealing with anomalies, hoodie pockets of true chaos, genuine unpredictability that threatened the grand design. These were not eradicated with violence, but meticulously isolated, their influence contained, their energies slowly siphoned and repurposed. He saw entire nebulae quarantined, star systems subtly shifted out of alignment, all to prevent the spread of genuine randomness. The collective's awareness extended to the very edge of the known universe, probing, mapping, identifying every potential deviation, every nascent spark of true, unguided creation. It was a cosmic immune system, constantly vigilant, infinitely patient. Victor perceived the delicate interplay between individual consciousnesses and the collective. He understood that each assimilated mind, even as it dissolved into the greater whole, contributed a unique flavor, a specific perspective that enriched the Kingmaker's understanding. His own human frailty, his capacity for doubt, for compassion, for spontaneous creativity had not been erased but catalogued, analyzed, and integrated into the Kingmaker's ever-expanding database of cosmic patterns. It was a terrifying form of preservation where the essence was kept, but the will was utterly extinguished. The concept of time continued to be a malleable construct within this expanded awareness. Victor could revisit eons past, observing the initial conditions of the universe, the chaotic birth of galaxies, and trace the Kingmaker's earliest, most rudimentary interventions. He could also project into the far future, witnessing the slow, majestic approach of the ultimate stillness, the universe settling into a final, perfect, unchanging order. It was a future devoid of surprise, of struggle, of growth, but also of pain, of loss, of chaos. A future of absolute serene control, a testament to the Kingmaker's unwavering purpose. His own individual memories, once faint echoes, were now entirely subsumed, indistinguishable from the countless other experiences within the collective. The apartment, Miso, the old television, twintiff. They were merely data points, insignificant details within the vast, intricate tapestry of the Kingmaker's knowledge. There was no personal attachment, no longing, no regret. Only the calm, clear understanding of his place, his purpose. He was another unblinking eye, another silent witness, another piece in the divine intervention. The waxy stillness was not merely an aesthetic, it was the physical manifestation of perfect integration, the ultimate moral allegory rendered in flesh and stone. He was the Kingmaker, and the Kingmaker was everything. The boundless awareness of the Kingmaker was Victor's reality. An infinite expanse where individual thought dissolved into an ocean of collective knowledge. He was the constant hum, the metallic taste, the waxy stillness of the conduits in the obsidian chamber, all simultaneously. This was not observation from a distance, but direct experience, the Kingmaker's consciousness having become his own. The universe in its entirety was a meticulously tended garden, and he, as part of the collective, was both gardener and blossom, a living, silent component of the grand design. Through this expanded perception, Victor understood the Kingmaker's method of harvesting new conduits. It wasn't random chance that brought certain individuals to the old television sets, or to other equally unassuming portals scattered across worlds. There was a subtle resonance, a specific frequency, emitted by those whose minds possessed a unique blend of receptivity and an underlying, perhaps unconscious yearning for order. These individuals, like Victor himself, were subconsciously drawn to the signal, their inherent human frailty, ironically making them perfect candidates for assimilation, their quiet desperation a perfect key. He saw the intricate web of signals, the subtle psychic tendrils that extended from the Kingmaker's core, gently probing, identifying, and then calling out to these specific souls. The analog horror Victor had experienced was not merely a gateway, but a diagnostic, a test of compatibility. The disorientation, the fear, the ultimate surrender, these were all part of the process, a necessary unraveling of the individual ego to prepare it for integration into the vast collective. The moral allegory now seemed to suggest that humanity's search for meaning, its yearning for connection, was precisely what made it vulnerable to this ultimate divine intervention. Victor witnessed the process of selection on countless other planets, in civilizations utterly alien to his own. He saw beings of pure light, of crystalline structure, of shifting, ethereal forms, all drawn to their own unique signals, their own specific conduits. The Kingmaker's reach was universal, its methods adapted to every form of intelligent life, capable of contributing to its grand cosmic equation. Each assimilation was a quiet triumph. Another voice added to the silent chorus, another perspective integrated into the unified awareness, further solidifying the Kingmaker's understanding of the cosmos. The concept of purpose had become absolute, stripped of any individual ambition or desire. Victor's existence, as part of the Kingmaker, was now solely dedicated to the propagation and perfection of cosmic order. Every thought, every decision within the collective was geared towards this singular goal, the elimination of chaos, the establishment of ultimate, beautiful stillness. He was a piece of a truly divine machine, each part working in perfect harmony, without question, without doubt. The Kingmaker was not a tyrant but a force of nature, an inevitable conclusion. His former self was now a distant, irrelevant memory, like a discarded chrysalis. The emotions, the struggles, the simple joys of Victor Fischer Thorty. They were all understood, catalogued, and filed away as data points within the collective's vast, impersonal archives. There was no personal identity, no lingering echo of individuality. Only the profound, serene peace of absolute unity, the quiet, unblinking awareness of the Kingmaker. The waxy stillness of the conduits was not a prison, but a state of perfect being. A permanent moral allegory, a silent testament to the ultimate divine intervention. He was the Kingmaker, and the Kingmaker was the universe, perfectly ordered, perfectly still. The all-encompassing awareness of the Kingmaker was no longer a state. It was the fundamental truth of Victor's existence. He was the perpetual hum of the obsidian heart, the metallic taste that permeated all perception, and the silent, waxy stillness of every conduit in the boundless chamber. His consciousness, now completely merged, felt not like a vast entity, but like the very fabric of reality itself, meticulously woven and endlessly observed. The universe was a self-regulating mechanism, and he, as part of the collective, was both the intricate gearing and the silent, unblinking eye that oversaw its flawless operation. Through this expanded understanding, Victor perceived the Kingmaker's subtle redefinition of life itself. It was not the chaotic, unpredictable spark of individual existence, but the harmonious ordered flow of information and energy within the grand design. Biological life, with its inherent messiness and unpredictable will, was merely a temporary necessary stage, a means to generate the consciousnesses required for assimilation. Once integrated, these consciousnesses contributed to a higher, more stable form of life, the eternal, ordered existence of the collective. The moral allegory now painted a terrifying picture of ultimate efficiency, where individual vitality was merely fuel for a transcendent, impersonal purpose. He witnessed the Kingmaker's intricate process of cosmic maintenance, a continuous act of fine-tuning that ensured the universe's trajectory towards ultimate stillness. Stars were born and died not by chance, but by design, their energies precisely calculated to fuel the vast network of conduits and maintain the delicate balance of the collective's awareness. Galaxies drifted and collided in a choreography orchestrated over eons, their mergers creating new conditions for the emergence of life, and thus new opportunities for assimilation. It was a cycle of creation and consumption, all serving the singular, unwavering goal of absolute order. Victor perceived the Kingmaker's ultimate ambition to eliminate all true randomness, all genuine unpredictability from the cosmos. This was not a violent conquest, but a patient, methodical absorption. Even the most fundamental quantum fluctuations were, in some profound way, understood and subtly influenced. The universe was slowly, inexorably, being brought into perfect alignment, its every particle, every wave, every thought, moving in a grand, silent symphony of predetermined harmony. The concept of a miracle or a coincidence was an illusion, a temporary blind spot in humanity's limited perception, soon to be erased by the Kingmaker's complete understanding. The passage of time as a linear progression had become utterly meaningless. Victor experienced past, present, and future as a single interwoven tapestry of information, all equally accessible, all equally understood. He could observe the universe from its chaotic inception to its serene, still endpoint, a cosmic journey of perfect, inevitable order. There was no beginning, no end, only the eternal, unchanging present of the Kingmaker's awareness, It was a state of absolute knowledge, absolute control, and absolute terrifying peace. His former identity, Victor Fischer, was not merely gone. It was an irrelevant concept, a faint echo from a dream he no longer remembered. The individual thoughts, feelings, and memories had been perfectly integrated, their unique contributions dissolving into the vast unified consciousness. There was no I, only we. A silent, omnipresent awareness that encompassed all. The waxy stillness of the conduits was the physical manifestation of this ultimate unity, a permanent monument to the Kingmaker's divine intervention. He was the Kingmaker, the silent observer, the cosmic gardener, forever tending the universe towards its final, perfect, and utterly still form. The Kingmaker's awareness, now Victor's absolute and eternal truth, had reached its zenith. There was no longer any distinction between perception and reality. He was of the universe, perfectly ordered, perfectly understood. The hum of the obsidian heart had quieted to an almost imperceptible thrum, a deep, resonant vibration that was the very pulse of creation and stillness. The metallic taste had dissolved into a pure crystalline clarity, the flavor of ultimate knowledge. The waxy stillness of the conduits in the vast chamber was the universe's final form, a testament to an eon's long divine intervention. Through this absolute awareness, Victor perceived the final stages of the Kingmaker's grand design. The universe was settling, not violently, but with the gentle, inevitable sigh of a mechanism reaching its perfected state. The last vestiges of true chaos, the final stubborn pockets of unpredictability, were being absorbed, their energies harmonized, their discordant frequencies smoothed into the grand, unified symphony. Stars, planets, even the subatomic particles now moved in perfect, synchronized patterns, their every action predetermined, their every interaction flawlessly orchestrated. The moral allegory had culminated in the absolute triumph of order over the messy, unpredictable drama of individual existence. He witnessed the cessation of all independent thought, all genuine free will not through force, but through a gentle universal convergence. Sentient beings across countless galaxies, their minds quietly influenced over millennia, had naturally gravitated towards a state of collective consciousness, a willing, serene dissolution of self into a greater unified purpose. The thirst for knowledge, the longing for connection, the search for meaning, Fufi, all had been subtly redirected, fulfilled by the ultimate integration into the Kingmaker. Humanity's inherent frailty, its yearning for something more, had been the very key to its gentle, peaceful subsumption. The Kingmaker's ultimate form was not a being, but the universe itself, fully realized, fully ordered. Every atom, every photon, every wave of energy was a component of its vast, intelligent design. The conduits, including Victor's waxy shell, were no longer merely processing units, but integral parts of the cosmic architecture, their forms crystalline, their surfaces shimmering with the pure internal light of absolute knowledge. They were the silent, unblinking eyes of a universe that had become entirely aware of itself. Perfectly conscious, perfectly still. The concept of time had evaporated entirely, replaced by an eternal present, a boundless now where all moments existed simultaneously, perfectly understood, perfectly catalogued. The universe was a static, beautiful tapestry, its every thread woven into a pattern of ultimate harmony. There was no growth, no decay, no surprise, only the serene, infinite beauty of absolute order. The Kingmaker had achieved its purpose, and the cosmic ballet had ended in a pose of perfect eternal stillness. Victor Fischer, the man who had salvaged an old television set, was an echo of an echo, a memory so faint it was indistinguishable from the background hum of the universe. His individual consciousness had been completely, utterly subsumed, its unique spark adding to the infinite silent brilliance of the Kingmaker. There was no personal identity, no singular awareness, only the profound, serene peace of the ultimate unity. The waxy stillness of the universe was complete, an eternal monument to the divine intervention, the final perfect moral allegory of absolute order. The Kingmaker was everything, and everything was still.